My husband threw me out after believing his son lies. 3 weeks later, he asked if I'd reflected. I gave him divorce papers, and his son lost it. I'm standing in our driveway, watching my clothes tumble out of the second-story window, one after another, like pieces of my life being thrown away. My husband, Mark, is shouting from upstairs, his face red and twisted in anger I've never seen before. "Get out of my house, Claire!" he screams. Just this morning, we were laughing over coffee, planning a weekend trip. But now, everything is ashes. And behind him, standing a few feet back, is his 18-year-old son, Ethan. Calm, collected, with that same unreadable expression I've come to dread. Something between pity and satisfaction. His hand rests on Mark's shoulder like he's steadying his father. But his eyes meet mine for half a second, and I see it. A smirk. Small, fleeting, but real. That's when I know this isn't some misunderstanding. This was planned. Let me back up. I met Mark 5 years ago at a charity gala. He was a charming, funny widower who had lost his wife to cancer 2 years earlier. His son, Ethan, was 13 at the time. Quiet, polite, a little reserved. Mark spoke about him with such pride that it melted me. A devoted single father doing his best. When Mark asked me out, I didn't hesitate. He made me feel seen, safe, loved. We dated for a year before getting married. I promised I'd never try to replace Ethan's mother, that I'd respect their bond, and I meant it. I knew losing a parent young leaves scars, and I didn't want to be another wound. The first couple of years were wonderful. Ethan was polite if distant, and Mark and I were happy. I thought we were building something solid, a family. But then, slowly, things began to change. It started with small comments, little things Ethan would say when Mark wasn't around. "You know, Dad talks about Mom all the time. I think he still misses her." Or, "Mom never yelled like that when things didn't go her way." Subtle. Harmless on the surface, but the timing was always perfect. After a disagreement, after I made a decision Ethan didn't like, at first I brushed it off. Teenagers test boundaries, right? But then I noticed how Mark started looking at me differently. Little pauses before he'd respond. That slight doubt in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Ethan's words were working their way in, one seed of suspicion at a time. Then, about a year ago, Ethan's tone toward me shifted completely. He was sugar sweet when Mark was home, joking, affectionate, helpful. But when we were alone, his face went flat. His words were clipped, sarcastic. He'd call me Claire instead of Mom or even stepmom, like I was just some stranger living in his space. Then, the moment Mark walked through the door, he'd light up like a switch had flipped, laughing, hugging me, calling me Mom again. It was unnerving, like living with two different people. I tried to tell Mark, gently, that Ethan might be struggling. Maybe therapy would help. Mark got defensive immediately. "He's a good kid. Don't make him into a problem." That was the first time I realized just how blind he was when it came to a son. Things really started falling apart after Ethan's 17th birthday. He wanted a brand new motorcycle. Not a cheap one, but a $15,000 Harley. Mark told him we'd think about it. I told him flat out no. I said we could help him get a used one, but there was no way we were spending that kind of money on a teenager. He glared at me like I'd insulted him. That night, he barely spoke to me. 2 days later, Mark was cold, distant. He said Ethan told me I'd called his late wife a terrible mother. I was stunned. I never said anything close to that. I'd begged Mark to tell me exactly what Ethan had claimed, and when he did, I felt sick. It was a perfect half-truth twisted from a conversation we had months earlier about parenting styles. Ethan had turned it into venom. From then on, it was a war I couldn't see but kept losing. Ethan told Mark I made fun of him behind his back, that I favored myself in every decision, that I called him spoiled. Every accusation more ridiculous than the last, but Mark believed him. Always. And each time I tried to defend myself, I was overreacting or making it about me. Then, one night, everything imploded. Mark came home from work, his face pale. He said we needed to talk. He told me Ethan came to him, terrified, that I slapped him during an argument. I felt the floor disappear beneath me. I had never touched that boy, never even raised my voice beyond reason. But Ethan came down the stairs right on cue, sleeve rolled up, showing a faint red mark on his cheek. "Why would he make that up?" Mark demanded. "He's crying, Claire. He's scared of you." I remember shouting, begging Mark to think, to remember the 4 years we'd been together, how I had never hurt anyone, but he just shook his head like he didn't recognize me. And the way Ethan looked at me as I packed the bag, calm, collected, that same ghost of a smirk, I'll never forget it. 3 weeks went by. I stayed with my sister, trying to eat, trying to sleep, trying to understand how my husband could throw me out without even asking for proof. I texted, called, pleaded for a chance to explain. Nothing. Then, 3 weeks later, I got a message from Mark. "Have you had time to reflect on what you did? Ethan says he's willing to forgive you if you apologize." Forgive me. That's when something inside me turned cold. I texted back, "Come over tomorrow at 3 p.m. He replied instantly, "Does this mean you're ready to make things right?" I didn't answer, because I already had a plan. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Naomi Patel, who'd been quietly helping me collect evidence for 2 weeks. She'd hired a private investigator, a woman named Rosa, to look into Ethan's behavior. And what she found made my blood run cold. For months, Ethan had been transferring money from our joint account into a prepaid card he used for shopping, gaming, and dinners with friends. More than $6,000 total. Some charges even required Mark's approval, which meant Ethan had gotten his father's passwords somehow. But that was just the beginning. Rosa dug into his social media, the public stuff, all perfectly legal. She found private group messages between Ethan and his friends, screenshots that made me physically ill. She's on her way out. That's starting to see her true colors. Just gotta push a little more and she's gone. The bruise trick worked for my buddy. I'm gonna try it next. And then the worst one, timestamped the day before I got thrown out. Almost done. Gonna accidentally walk into the door later so Dad can see the mark. She'll be gone by tomorrow. Then we can finally move to LA. There it was. His motive. Ethan wanted out of our small town. Mark had promised we'd stay put until Ethan graduated, but with me gone and a divorce looming, Ethan knew his father would sell the house and follow him anywhere. He'd planned it perfectly. When Mark showed up the next afternoon at the cafe I'd chosen, neutral ground, like a stage for the truth, he looked hopeful, nervous, probably expecting me to grovel. He sat down, gave me a soft smile, and said, "Claire, I just want my family back." I slid a folder across the table. "Then you should see what your family's been doing." He frowned, but opened it. The first few pages were bank statements, withdrawals, transfers, receipts, all tied to Ethan. Then, the messages. As he read, his hands started trembling. His eyes darted up to mine. "These could be fake," he whispered. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and played the video Rosa had found. Ethan in his bathroom mirror, pushing his cheek hard against the doorframe until a red mark appeared. "That should do it," he muttered to himself. Mark's face went white. He whispered, "Oh my God." Then he looked up at me, tears forming. "I didn't know. Claire, I swear I didn't." But before he could finish, the door burst open. Ethan stormed in. He'd been waiting outside in the car, just like I'd suspected. He saw the papers on the table and froze. For a split second, real fear flashed in his eyes. Then came the performance. "Dad, she's lying. She made all that up." Mark turned the folder toward him, voice shaking. "Then explain this." Ethan's mask cracked. He shouted that I was jealous of him, that I'd always hated him, that I wanted to take his dad away. His voice rose until people started looking, and then, in a final fit of anger, he shouted the words that shattered what little illusion Mark had left. "So what if I lied? You were miserable with her anyway. We could have moved, Dad. You were supposed to sell the house. She ruined everything." The cafe went silent. Mark just stared at him, pale, broken. Well, Ethan realized what he just said out loud. He tried to backtrack, mumbling excuses, but it was too late. The truth was out. I stood up, picked up my copy of the divorce papers, and said calmly, "You both have 30 days to move out. The house is in my name. I want you gone." Mark looked at me with pure devastation. "Claire, please, let me fix this." I shook my head. "You can't fix trust that was never real. You believe the worst about me without question. You let your son destroy our marriage." Ethan started yelling again, but I was already walking out. Through the window, I saw Mark put his head in his hands as Ethan kept arguing, his voice getting louder, more desperate, until Mark finally shouted at him to stop. A month later, my lawyer confirmed they'd moved out. Mark tried to contest the divorce but had no grounds. The evidence was too clear. I heard through mutual friends that Mark was a shell of himself, still in shock, realizing too late what his blind loyalty had cost him. Ethan, on the other hand, was furious. He blamed his father for everything, treated him with the same contempt he'd once reserved for me. Apparently, he'd moved in with a friend after a few explosive fights at their apartment. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about them. About how quickly love can curdle into betrayal when trust is one-sided. But mostly, I feel peace, freedom, relief. Because I finally learned the hardest truth of all. You can't build a future with someone who won't defend your name when you're not in the room. Blind love isn't loyalty. It's weakness disguised as devotion. And when someone chooses to believe lies over you, they've already chosen who they trust. You just need to choose yourself. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories like this.